Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. Terry crouched by the window and stared out into the snowy darkness behind the glass. In the next room, the children were sniffling quietly. The younger twins, Stanley and Michael, slept in the same bed, cuddled up as usual, and the three older ones were nestled on the huge couch. Terry made a cot for herself in her husband's absence, so she could get up in the morning without disturbing the children's sleep. She and her husband, Michael, had met when they were very young and had fallen in love, one might say, at first sight. Terry knew right away that this unkempt, embarrassingly smiling guy was her destiny. 3 months after they met, they got married. Thankfully, there was no one to stop them and persuade them to test their feelings. Terry's mother died before she graduated from high school, and Michael had no family at all. He was brought up in an orphanage, completed a course in auto mechanics, received a one-room apartment from the government, and there he met his one true love. Terry, as they made plans for their future lives, the young people talked about how they would definitely have a large family. Both understood that there was no one to help them, that it would be very difficult, but they loved each other, loved their future unborn children, and were confident in their own abilities. And now, Terry, as her spouse liked to call her, remembered their conversation when she learned she was pregnant again, and this time she was having twins. Michael, maybe we shouldn't have 2 more children. We're struggling from penny to penny as it is, and it's going to be even harder. Terry, what are you talking about? Don't even mention it. I love you, you love me, and it's hard. For now, soon all our babies will be grown up, and it'll be easy and fun. You remember how hard it is to live alone in this world, and they won't be lonely. They will be rich in their relatives. They will love each other. And we will surely teach them that. It won't be easy with 2 little ones. The older Katie is only 8. Of course she tries to help me, but what can she do with her tiny hands? Terry, don't whine. The babies are already there. They can already hear us talking, and now they want to talk you out of ruining their lives with all their little strength. Terry got tears in his eyes. How shameful of you to say such words. As if I really want to kill our children. Then Michael hugged his wife tightly, sat her in his lap, and hummed softly. The crane's long legs. They didn't find their way. They walked on their side. How do you like to sing to our children? I've never heard such a lullaby before. My mother often sang it to me as a little girl. And now when I sing it to our children, I remember my mother. She had a magic voice. She even tried to enter a conservatory when she was young, but it didn't work out, and then I was born and she gave up the dream. Terry, you have a magical voice yourself. You should study, be a singer. All the Margarets would be weeping with delight. Me, the kids. Hey, silly, do you think I have any regrets? That I would trade you or our children for a dubious career as a singer. That was the end of the conversation. The twins came into the world safely, and things got really bad. There was a catastrophic shortage of money. Sure, there was child support, but such a large family required a lot. Michael did not shy away from any job, so he was often away from home. And Terry alone was short of hands, because the older children needed her attention and care as well. Katie had to be taken to school in the morning, Ashley and Peter to nursery and kindergarten, and then all day long, like a squirrel in a wheel. Terry didn't have a minute to rest or do anything for herself. Only sometimes when she put the twins to bed would she start humming their favorite songs, and sometimes she would get so carried away that her sons would be long asleep while she sang her favorite songs from a treasured notebook that had belonged to her mother. But a few weeks later, Michael came home excited. Terry immediately knew something was wrong, but she couldn't tell if it was good or bad. After supper, when all the kids had gone to bed and even Peter, the restless Peter, was asleep, Michael called his wife in for a serious talk. Terry, You know we're short on money. I've got an offer to go on a job for 3 months. I could make a lot of money in 3 months, and we could solve our financial problems. Finally, we'll buy all the kids clothes, shoes, and something to pamper ourselves. How do you feel about it? Michael, I don't know what to say. It's going to be very hard for me without you all this time. How am I alone with young children? Terry, let's try. I'm a man. I have to provide for my family. It's a shame to bring home pennies for all sorts of shirking. I want to solve all the problems at once. I'm afraid of something, Michael. Terry huddled against her husband's strong chest. My heart is so restless. You'll be there alone without us, and we'll be without you. It's scary. Don't be afraid, silly. Of course you'll have to be patient, but these months will fly by quickly. And then maybe you'll like my new job so much that you'll send me there yourself. A week later, Michael left for the shift, and Terry was left alone with 5 children. Money was tight, but she wasn't discouraged, trying to come up with tasty Terrys of cheap produce, something to pamper the kids with, playing games together in the evenings, even though she was exhausted. Michael called infrequently. The connection was poor, but his calls were like a breath of fresh air for Terry, who was thirsty. She looked forward to her husband's return and swore to her husband's return and swore to herself that she would never let him go for such a long time again, no matter how much money problems arose. It was better to have her beloved always by her side. Tonight, for some reason, her heart was restless. Some heavy premonition kept her awake and awake. She stared intensely into the darkness outside the window and whispered as if in prayer, Michael, my darling good man, may you be well. May you be well. May everything end well. The kids and I are waiting for you. Stanley and Michael are starting to get some syllables. Peter is teaching them to speak. All the kids miss you so much, and I miss you the most. Honey, love, may all be well, and you come back to me. I love you. It seemed to her that if she maintained this invisible, intangible connection with her husband, nothing bad would happen. And at that moment, the phone rang in the unsettling silence of the kitchen. Oh, who's there so late? I wish the kids hadn't woken up. Something made Terry's heart ache, and she picked up the phone and heard the voice of Sergei, Michael's friend who had found him the job. Terry, have courage. I know you're a strong woman. You need to be strong for your children. Oh my God, what happened? Terry whispered with frozen lips. What happened to Michael? Is he alive? No, he's dead. He went out in a snowstorm to meet a delivery truck and lost his way. We looked for him for almost 8 hours, but when we found him, it was over. Me and the guys here have discounted on a coffin and some more money collected. The day after tomorrow we will arrive. But there was another unpleasant issue. Our bosses refused to pay compensation for Michael's death. They say it was his own fault. They say no one sent him to go and meet a truck in a storm, and that they would have done it without him, and that there are people specially trained for such operations. And in general, it was after hours. Although what on watch after hours? Terry heard it all, as if through absorbent cotton. Michael is gone. Michael is gone. He would never come back to her again. Never again will he hold her in his arms in his strong bosom. He will never see our children grow up. I will be alone all my life, without his love and faithfulness, without his love and faithfulness, without his support. Mom is gone, and now Michael. Heavy sobs came to her throat, but she still managed to keep them in her throat with some incredible effort of will. She did not want to wake the children with her howling, but how now to raise them alone, without a father, without any support from relatives. Such a terrible feeling of loneliness and hopelessness gripped the unhappy woman that she whimpered softly, like a little abandoned puppy. And at that moment, Katie's voice rang out. Mommy, are you awake? Are you crying? Mom, what's wrong? It's okay, baby. Mommy's teeth hurt. Terry found the strength to smile a little at her daughter. Tomorrow I'll go to the doctor and get my teeth fixed. Go to sleep, sweetheart. And in her inflamed brain there was only one thought. Orphans, you poor orphans, How will I raise you alone without a father, without money, without support? Terry had no memory of the funeral. It was all a blur. When she saw Michael in the coffin, it was as if a black veil covered everything. He was lying there as if alive, as if asleep, and she wanted to wake him, as if he couldn't hear her, couldn't forget their love and their children. After the funeral, Sam came up to her, put an envelope in her hand and said, "Terry, you should go to our office there. On the envelope I wrote the address. Talk about your situation. Tell them you have children. Let them pay the money that is due to Vaitya." Well, they are people, after all. They're not gonna make it. They should understand. The man did not go willingly to meet this bird. Then he looked into her face, frozen like a dead mask, and stopped talking, shook her hand softly and said, "Well, if you need anything, we're going back to work tonight. But you should go anyway. You have kids." He stomped around silent Terry for a few more minutes, then turned sharply and walked away, cursing softly through his teeth. Terry entered her apartment automatically, forgetting to pick up the twins from the neighbor she'd left them with during the funeral. She collapsed on the couch and howled, dryly, without tears, in her full voice. But the sound frightened her so much that she soon fell silent and seemed to return to reality. She got up, smoothed her hair, and followed her sons. They were already awake, and Grandma Gwen was feeding them semolina. She looked at the young woman with mournful pity and said, "Never mind, Terry. Be strong. Fate gives everyone the test that anyone can withstand. You got kids. You got 5 of them. That's how much memory Michael has left. It's gonna be hard for you, but you're strong. You can take it. Just make sure you don't touch the bottle. You'll get into it before you know it." "Come on, Grandma Gwen, what bottles? The children here sometimes have no money to buy bread, and you're talking about bottles." "Oh, Terry, I know what I'm saying. I've seen too much in my life. But remember what you said." She looked into Terry's face with a sigh and shook her head. Oh, bitter grief. For the next few days, the woman moved like a machine, doing all the housework, taking the children to day care and nursery, feeding and putting the twins to bed, but not feeling anything, as if she were dead. She had completely forgotten that Stanley and Michael had a routine checkup at the end of the month. But the home nurse dropped in on her that evening and wondered why they had missed the checkup. Terry was always very punctual and brought all the children in on time. Terry had to bathe the children urgently and take them to the clinic the next morning. There, the young doctor she had already met looked sympathetically at the woman's gray face and sent the nurse with the children to the clinic for tests. You could see he was sympathetic to the unhappy widow with 5 children, but he didn't know what to say or how to comfort her in such a situation. But when the tests came in, he changed his face abruptly and began to examine Stanley with great care. Stanley was the youngest of the twins, and therefore, Terry thought, weaker, less active, more vivacious, more quickly tired. The doctor asked her many questions about her son's behavior and development. Terry answered, and with each question she became more and more nervous. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Doctor, tell me frankly, what's wrong with Stanley? Is there something wrong with him? Are you hiding something? I don't want to scare you. More examination is needed, but I suspect he has mitral valve insufficiency. Of course, you should not panic nowadays. It is successfully operated, but you will need money for drugs and rehabilitation." From the clinic, Terry walked stunned. The next few days were a terrible black stream for her. She had to leave Michael with his grandmother Gwen every day, and with her second son she had to run to the doctors, take endless tests, comfort him, comfort herself, and wonder where to get the money for the treatment. I can't lose you, my baby." The woman carried her son home, holding him close to her, whispering frantically as if to cast a spell. "Michael would never forgive me if I lost one of his children. I have to cure you. Find that damn money. I'm strong. I'm the strongest. I'll work, but I'll cure my poor son. Good Grandma Gwen advised Terry to go to the charities, which promised to help, but she didn't have much faith in others' help. She went to the address Sam had given her, but she could get nothing. There, indifferently and aloof, they gave her an official letter stating that Michael had died through his own fault, having gone after hours on a case he had nothing to do with. Because of his misconduct, work was disrupted for 3 days, so no payment was due to his family. Everything went to compensate for the company's loss. Terry was spurred on by this unpleasantness, and she was very determined. She had hired herself to scrub the floors in 2 offices at 6 in the morning, scrubbed the porches of 2 neighboring houses, grabbed every part-time job she could, left Ashley and Peter for 5 days, and sometimes her neighbor and sometimes Katie, who had grown up since her father's death, were with the twins. She was the only one of the children who understood that Daddy was gone and would never be, that her little brother was seriously ill, and that Mommy needed help. There was one good thing about this grueling job. Falling on her bed at night, Terry just passed out and slept the possible 5 hours without thinking about the fact that she was now a widow and that her beloved Michael would never set foot in their house again. One day, while going to work in the evening at a nearby house, she saw a very young boy near the entrance. He was sitting with his head down and did not react to people passing by. When she returned home 2 hours later, she saw the same boy again, and it was as if he hadn't even moved in that time. A man who's been through a lot of adversity reacts to other people's misfortunes. Terry thought something was wrong with the young man. She stepped closer and asked, "Dude, what's taking you so long? It's cold, and your jacket is really thin. Where do you live? Or are you waiting for someone? It's cold by nightfall. You'll get sick." The stranger raised his head, and Terry saw inflamed lips on his gray face and brightly glistening eyes, the kind her children used to have when they had a fever. The boy struggled to open his dry lips and whispered, "I have nowhere to go." "You young man, I think you have a fever." Terry was sure of that now. The boy had been sitting out here in the cold for hours. Something must have happened. But what could she do? She couldn't take him home. The kids were there and he was sick. Besides, Stanley was weak enough as it was. God forbid he should get any other infection. But she could not leave a man in such a condition on the street without help either. Then Terry remembered that there was a small room under the stairs where the janitor used to live. But it was empty now. There was an old cot there, and it was warm. She nodded her steaming head and said confidently, "Come with me." He rose slowly, grasping the wall with his hand, and followed the woman indifferently. Terry's mind was spinning. He needs some medicine, to see what's available at home, and to go to the pharmacy. Something for fever and anti-inflammatory. Also give him some tea and bring him something to eat. He's just a young boy. He's probably still weak from hunger. She set the boy down on the trestle bed. He was so cold he turned blue, and his teeth were tapping softly. Now, I'll help you," Terry said, just as she did with her children. "Now I'll get you some medicine and hot tea, and you'll have a drink and a nap, and you'll feel better." There were no antiviral medications at home, so I had to run to the drugstore and buy some medicine for my fever as well. Then I boiled some tea, made some sandwiches, and took them to the boy. He was so weak he couldn't drink by himself. His hands were shaking. But once he had eaten and warmed up, he recovered little by little and quickly fell asleep. Terry brought an old blanket from home and carefully covered the poor man. A phrase from a once famous book flashed through her mind. "We are responsible for what we have tamed." As she went to bed, she involuntarily thought, "I have a mouthful of problems, and now I've got myself another document. But what can I do? If I hadn't identified him, they'd have found a dead body by morning. I mean, good people help me, so I should help if I can. That would be fair." In the morning, the boy felt better, drank the medicine again, drank tea, and ate the soup that Terry had brought him, and then fell asleep again. He must have been awake for a long time and wandered around, the woman involuntarily thought. And indeed, on the third day, the young man recovered. His name was Henry, and he was only 18 years old. He had just turned 18 last month. He did not remember his father. He did not remember his father. His mother had married his stepfather when the boy was 10 years old. The stepfather drank, at first on holidays and weekends, and then more and more. And when he was kicked out of work, he did not get drunk at all. He began to raise his hand against her mother, and sometimes he forced the poor woman to drink with him. My mother passed away a year ago. After that, the stepfather took his friends and some women out every day. They drank, sometimes fought. Henry had his share, but he had nowhere to go. He had to put up with it until last week, when his stepfather drunkenly burned down the house, and no one knew where he had disappeared to. Henry had only his passport in his pocket and some money. But they were soon gone too. He spent a few nights in the basement, but was kicked out by the local homeless, and the last night he spent on a bench in the park and froze to death. So Terry got another son or nephew or younger brother to add to her extended family. Henry was a kind, helpful, handy guy. He did not sit idly by. He did not sit idly by, helping Terry, trying to work wherever he could. The children began to call him Uncle Henry and quickly became accustomed to him. Soon it turned out that Henry, just like Terry, loved to sing. It turns out that while his mother was still alive and well, she took him to music school, where he learned to play the guitar, but most of all he liked solfeggio lessons and voice training. One day the boy heard Terry humming songs from his mother's cherished notebook and was struck by the purity of her voice. "Terry, you should have gone to the conservatory. You have a magic voice," said the young man enthusiastically. "And what were those songs you were singing just now?" "I've never heard them before. These are my mother's songs, a whole notebook of her work left as a memento of her." "And Mom was a great singer," Terry smiled fondly. "I loved listening to her as a child. There was one song in particular she loved, and it always brought tears to my eyes when she sang it. I think it's something very personal, and the woman sang softly. The simple but touching tune moved her to tears, and she believed that there was a sincere, eternal love that never ended." Henry picked up Terry's old guitar and quietly echoed her. Their voices mingled harmoniously, and the song took on a new, unearthly sound. Quietly the door opened, and Grandma Gwen came into the kitchen. She listened in silence, wiping away her tears. When Terry stopped talking, the neighbor said, "And I heard who was singing so beautifully, and I rushed to the sound. The two of you were singing very beautifully, just like on TV. You should learn, but there's no way around it." At first, Granny Gwen scolded her when she found out that Terry had sheltered a homeless man under the stairs, telling her that she should think of herself and the children first, not another man's boy. But then, getting to know Henry better, and being penetrated by his sorrowful story of life, the old woman even began to help the boy, praising him for his hard work and cheerful disposition. From that day on, in their brief moments of rest, Terry and Henry began to sing a duet of songs from the cherished notebook. Sometimes they argued about the melody and changed the arrangement, but they both enjoyed singing. Then one day, Henry brought a newspaper and showed Terry an ad. "Friends, we're looking for talent." A big production center in the capital announced a national contest. Those wishing to participate had to record their own song, preferably a song by a songwriter, and send it to the studio at the address. Henry was fired up about the idea. "Terry, let's record our favorite song and send it to the capital. We're really good at it. Maybe we'll finally get lucky." The woman had been reluctant for a long time, though her desire to participate in the contest, to show off her voice and her mother's gentle song, was growing stronger every day. Of course, there was no money to record in a professional recording studio, and even if there were, Terry would not spend it on such nonsense when her child needs expensive treatment. So they decided to make do with a little spending. They set up a cassette recorder and made an audio tape. We had to work hard and spend a lot of time re-recording the tape and then cleaning the entrances at night. But in the end, a good tape was made. The next morning, right after cleaning out the offices, Terry went to the post office and sent her tape in a valuable parcel to the studio address. The production center was buzzing, as it always is a few days before the results of major competitions are summed up. Hundreds of discs with recordings of contestants from all over the country were still lying untouched in the back room. And then Susan's secretary ran into the audition room and shouted, "Guys, someone even sent me an audio cassette." What a laugh. Look how old it is. Everyone looked around and laughed at the tape in the girl's hands. The jokes flowed, but the founder of the contest, the general director of the production center, millionaire and philanthropist Justin Nicholson, quickly stopped the nonsensical chatter by saying, "Stop talking out of turn. People have all sorts of circumstances. Since they sent this tape, we have to listen to it and give our verdict. And such jokes are unprofessional and humiliate you in the first place." No one dared argue with the boss, as he was called in the studio. They quickly got the necessary equipment and put on a tape. Of course, the quality of the recording left much to be desired, but the song was brand new, previously unknown, very touching, and the voices weaving together seemed to soar upwards and take the soul, revealing everyone's longing or dream of true love. Susan, who had lingered in the audition room to find out what song was sent in on the old tape, sighed quietly. "What a wonderful record. It even makes me want to cry." The CO sat quietly, almost without breathing. There were tears in his eyes. It was as if he was dreaming in reality. And indeed, it was as if the man was 30 years ago, walking down a shady street with a thin, modest girl with huge gray-blue eyes, and they were composing this very song line by line. One for two, one for life. At that moment it seemed to them that there would be no end to their happiness. No one knew these songs that they composed together, only he and she. But he never sang them to anyone, never showed them to anyone, and frankly, he had forgotten the words to many of them. And then, like a ghost from the past, most favorite song on the old cassette. He stood up and spoke clearly and separately. "Susan, contact these performers immediately and invite them to visit us in the capital. Send by urgent mail if there is no email address. All travel expenses are my responsibility. Tell them that everything will be paid. Accommodation, food, absolutely everything. Certify them, please. Book tickets as soon as possible. As soon as they arrive, come straight to me. Do it." And Justin Nicholson quickly left the hall. Everyone was stunned into silence. No one dared to say a word, and the secretary, grabbing the envelope, quickly ran to her desk. She knew better than anyone that the boss did not tolerate any delay. Good thing the envelope with the tape had a detailed mailing address and cell phone number. When the phone rang and an unfamiliar number came up, Terry was a little scared. Maybe there was some bad news again, or Stanley's tests had gotten worse, or she had to go to the doctor's office again and continue the tests. That was all the news she'd been getting lately. But a pleasant female voice said it was a call from a production center in the capital, asking her to come to them as soon as possible for an audition. This is insisted on by the CEO himself, Justin Nicholson. Terry was dizzy, and her heart was beating 3 times faster, and she opened her mouth silently, unable to say a word back. "Girl, can you hear me? You don't have to worry about money. All the expenses for tickets, lodging, and meals are on our company's account. And now I need your information for the tickets, and then I will give you the flight number and departure date. But I can't do that right away. It's just," Terry whispered, "I have kids, I have work. I need to make arrangements. Look, not everyone gets a chance like this. Take a leave of absence from work. You can do it without pay. We'll pay your travel allowance. Ask someone to stay with the kids. I don't think you'll be with us long. We can make a professional recording in a day or 2. Do you realize that your song is of interest to the CEO himself? It's literally a priceless gift of fate. I'm going to find out about the flights, and you solve your problems, and I'll call you later." Terry sat completely stunned. At that moment, Henry, who had gone to the daycare center to pick up the children, entered the kitchen. Seeing her upturned face, he immediately asked, "Is something wrong?" "You and I have been invited to the Capitol, to the production center. Tickets, Henry, and meals, all paid, even travel expenses they promised to pay." "Hooray!" Henry shouted loudly. "We finally got lucky. Why are you sitting there so dead?" "We're going to make it. I always knew I had to get lucky someday." The next 3 days passed in turmoil and haste. Many problems had to be solved in the shortest possible time. A little tidying up, to get Henry some decent clothes for very little money, and, most importantly, to persuade Grandma Gwen to stay with the children for such a long period of time. It wasn't an easy thing to do. The old woman was afraid she could not cope with 5 children at once. But then chance came to the rescue. The young doctor, who had had an important part in Terry's fate, suggested that Stanley be admitted to the hospital for a more detailed examination, and that Ashley and Peter be left at daycare for 5 days. With Baba Gwen remained Katie, the oldest, and Michael, with whom she vowed to help. For the first time in their lives, Terry and Henry were on an airplane and in business class. They were overwhelmed by the comfort and service, the courtesy and helpfulness of the staff, the delicious food, the opportunity to watch a movie in flight. But most of all, they were feverish with anticipation of meeting the general organizer of the national competition himself. They were met at the airport by Susan's secretary and Daniel's driver. Susan immediately said, "I'm sorry, but we had a little force majeure." Justin Nicholson himself was unexpectedly in the hospital. He got sick right at the studio. "But don't worry, he asked us to put you up at his house. His wife and stepson live there. It's a big house, so you won't be in the way." And soon our heroes found themselves in a luxurious mansion in an elite district of the capital. Both of them had only seen such houses in movies with their own park, swimming pool, guards, and servants. Brigitte, the young wife of the host, with a disgruntled look, pointed out to the guests their rooms on the 3rd floor. The rooms were small, most likely meant for servants, but our heroes, accustomed to the hardships of life, found them chill. In the evening, the landlady had gone out on her own business, and her big-headed son had gone to a nightclub. So Terry went down to the kitchen and talked to the housekeeper. The woman turned out to be chatty, even a little chatty. She said that Bridget was the owner's second wife, and that he had lived well with his previous wife. But there had been no love lost. And now he married a year ago, took this capricious girl with a son, and now they are trying to arrange things his own way. But the boss is a hard ass. You can't play around with him. It's not for nothing he was able to earn and save so much money himself, but his wife gets on his nerves. She just wants to inherit. After all, they have an age difference of 15 years. Neither Terry nor Henry liked to sit idle. Both found things to do. Terry helped Nancy Davis do tomorrow's chores and scrub the kitchen and hallway floors, while Henry washed the owner's car and swept the garden paths. They made instant friends with the staff, for the haughty Bridget loved to play the lady and wouldn't even pour herself a glass of water. The next morning, Terry and Henry were taken to the hospital to see Justin Nicholson. For some reason, our heroine was so excited, as if her fate depended on this meeting. The boy was asked to wait in the corridor, and Terry entered the room. On a large bed lay a very pale man with somehow familiar eyes. "Hello, Terry. I'll ask you right away without putting it off. Where did you get these songs?" "My mother wrote them, and she used to hum them to me when she was alive." "Mommy died when I was only 17, Terry said hastily, reading the mute question in the man's eyes. He covered his eyes with his hand and was silent for a while. "You might not believe me, but your mother and I wrote these songs together. We loved each other. She came to the conservatory that summer, and I was already in my 2nd year there. I fell in love with her at first sight. We were so happy we thought it would be forever. But my parents didn't want a provincial daughter-in-law. I left for a gig, and when I came back a week later, she was no longer in the capital. They succeeded in keeping us apart. It's also nasty, so dirty. I don't want to remember. Poor Mommy. Terry stretched out, confused. I understand things better now. She never told me why she left the capital, why she didn't make it. I thought Mom didn't qualify for the conservatory. That's why she got so upset and went back home. And when it came up, my mom always had tears in her eyes. And she would hug me, telling me that everything was okay, that everything was going to end well. At these words, Justin Nicholson looked at Terry strangely and asked, "Wait, did Mom get married? Do you know your father?" "No. It was always just me and my mom. She never even looked at a man. When I was little, Mama used to tell me that Daddy was an astronaut. And then she told me that she loved my father so much that she couldn't love anyone else. Yudochka, we have to do a DNA test right away." I never thought. How come? Why didn't Rita tell me anything? Was the resentment against my parents so strong? Or did she believe I was unfaithful? The fact is that when I left under my father's pressure, my mother met Margaret and told her that I had a fiancé and was getting married that summer. I guess my mother was rude and harsh. She could be like that at times, but Margaret had my phone number, and I didn't have her number. Back then, cell phones were out of the question. He covered his eyes with his hand again, and then began frantically pressing the bell button. A minute later, the ward doctor came running and, listening to the wishes of an influential patient, quickly arranged everything. He promised that the laboratory would do a rapid test and the result would be known tomorrow. Terry spent the whole day at the bedside of her potential father. They talked so much about their experiences. He asked greedily about Margaret, about growing up, about her children, and about her dead husband. Justin Nicholson could not restrain himself. Tears rolled from his eyes despite his strong and strong-willed character. "My life is almost over, and I didn't know I'd always remembered and loved only your mother, my Margaret. When I heard that song, it all came over me at once, and I thought I was going to burst into tears right there in front of everybody. I could hardly wait to see you. Come and see me tomorrow, please, because I'm afraid I don't have much time left." For the umpteenth time, Terry's heart ached, wondering if she was going to lose this man the way she had lost her mother and husband, Michael. Had fate lured her with sweet hope only to take it away? She had never had a father. But she had always dreamed that one day a strong and intelligent man would come and lift her up in his arms and say, "I'm your daddy, daughter. I'm back home, and now we'll always be together, and no one will tease or hurt her anymore. Daddy will stand up for her, and she'll always be proud of him and listen to him." On leaving the room, Terry came face to face with the doctor. He was walking with the test ready and said, "The test was done faster, and I can congratulate you. You are Justin Nicholson's daughter with a probability of 99 9/10%. What was going on in the woman's heart at that moment is impossible to describe in words. She feared only one thing, that her father, who had been so unintentionally found, was seriously ill and might leave her. "Doctor, tell me, what about Daddy? Is he going to get better? He's not an old man yet. He's always led a healthy life. His housekeeper told me he never drank or smoked. He exercises as much as he can. He likes swimming, likes tennis. He also monitored his diet. So why did he get so sick so suddenly?" The doctor looked thoughtfully at the girl. "I can't really answer that question. I'm at a loss myself. We've already had one conference, and we're going to have another one in the next few days. Justin Nicholson has very unclear symptoms. It's a blurry picture of the epidemic. But don't worry, we'll fix him." The doctor smiled encouragingly when he saw Terry's expression change with excitement for his newly acquired father. The doctor insisted that she return to the room, and together they broke the news to her father. When Terry returned to the room, Justin Nicholson knew from her happy and confused face that the test was positive. "My daughter," he almost sobbed. "My daughter, forgive me for living without me. I didn't know anything." His shoulders were shaking, and his voice was broken with love and despair. Terry even feared he was about to have a heart attack. That must have been what the doctor thought, too. He brought out some medicine and said soothingly, "Please don't worry so much. It's all right. Terry, please calm your father down. Don't let him worry. It's not good for his condition." Terry crouched on the edge of the bed and took her father's hand. "Daddy, please calm down. I'm begging you. You're so excited. I'm afraid you're going to get sick. It's not your fault. It was my mother's choice. She was a proud wife, yet loved you all her life. I look at you, and I see my Margaret's eyes. It was the greatest love of my life, and I guess God punished me for something, that I didn't know my child and had no more children. I thought I was going to die that way without experiencing any fatherly love. And now, I'm so happy. Dad, you have 5 grandchildren now. They'll be so happy to have a grandfather. The kids are always asking me why they don't have grandparents. Show me their pictures again. I want to know everything about them." And Terry went on to say that Kathy was her most responsible helper, that Ashley was a big bully who couldn't stand to be made to do anything, that Peter was a gentle and quiet boy, and that the twins Stanley and Michael were still small but liked to do everything themselves. The doctor looked into the room several times, and Terry couldn't let go of her father. Justin Nicholson kept asking her to sit for a little while longer. Finally, the doctor insisted that the patient needed to rest, and the woman left, promising to come back tomorrow, as early as possible, and stay all day to discuss all plans for the near future. The mansion already knew the shocking news. Bridget greeted her guests with a fake smile, but in her eyes Terry read such hatred that she involuntarily shuddered. "I heard what the DNA test showed. It turns out you're my husband's daughter." "Well, congratulations. How come he didn't know anything about you until now?" "Amazing story, of course." And she walked out. But our heroine heard her hiss through her teeth. "Such a bastard. You're imposing on our head, and with all your brood." Terry, after all the experiences of the day, had not been able to sleep for a long time. It was well past midnight, but she was still lying there with her eyes open. When Terry realized she wouldn't fall asleep, she decided to open the window and get some fresh air. Frame opened silently. The woman breathed in the cool night air, but involuntarily held her breath as she heard a loud conversation between Bridget and her son in the room below. "She'll want money now, and she'll try to get her inheritance after your husband's death. We've been trying so hard to get him, and we're going to get nothing." "Calm down, son. Tomorrow I'll put this medicine in his food and in the orange and carrot juice that Justin loves so much. I will go to the hospital and feed him myself, like a caring wife. They told me he couldn't take another dose and he'd have another seizure. And then it would be a matter of technology, a month at the most, and I would be a free widow. We'll cremate the body quickly, say the deceased did it himself, and then we'll challenge the DNA test. Let him fight us. I'll get the best lawyers, and she ain't got no money for nothing. That pauper ain't gonna get nothing. Mom, what if it doesn't work out? What if something goes wrong? He'll survive, and we won't get anything again. The man who gave me this remedy assured me that it was very strong." You can see how he was immediately twisted. He was as healthy as an ox before, and he would have lived to be 100 years old. "But we won't give him that chance," Bridget chuckled nastily. "And even if we don't manage to overturn the DNA test, I came up with another way out, and it's even better than the first. We'll move Justin home. After the stroke, ask Terry to take care of poor Daddy, and then we'll set her up. And then prove that she purposely starved her father to get a rich inheritance, and that she hated him because he abandoned her mother. Mommy, you're a genius at scams. You and I are going to get everything we've ever dreamed of. Justin in the grave, his daughter in jail, grandchildren in an orphanage, and we'll go to Spain. My dream is to live in Barcelona." Terry listened, afraid to move and give herself away with a careless movement. She frantically scrambled through her head for every possible action. A cold shiver ran down her spine and if she fell asleep and didn't learn anything about these plans, her father might die, and she herself might go to jail for something she hadn't done. And her poor children. My God, they could have ended up in an orphanage. Henry told me what it was like for him there. No, Terry won't let that happen. She's a mother and she'll protect her poor father and her children. And after a few minutes, the plane came together. Early in the morning, Terry and Henry slipped out of the mansion without waiting for the driver and car, and somehow made their own way to the hospital. It was still very early in the morning, and no one was allowed in. But Terry begged the guard to call Mr. Nicholson's attending physician to see her. The doctor was impressed by the woman's disturbed appearance and confused story. He promised to take all necessary measures and left, but warned Terry not to disturb the patient in any way. When Bridget sailed into the room before lunch, with a gentle smile, Terry was already sitting there. "I'm so glad you found your lost daughter." The oligarch's wife almost sang. "I came to see you and brought you a homemade lunch. I know that you love fresh morsels, so I cooked it all with love and myself. Now Ludochka will help me feed you, and tomorrow you will be perfectly healthy." At this point, the doctor came into the room and said that the patient now categorically cannot be fed with food from home, as Justin Nicholson revealed an allergic reaction, but it is not yet known for what products. Bridget tried to object and even scandalized, but her husband quickly reassured her, saying that the doctor knows best what to do. After sitting for a few more minutes, Bridget was about to leave, excusing herself with some unexpected business, some fake smile on her face. She kept nervously rubbing her purse with her hands, and clearly she did not find her place. But when the woman stood up, she was met at the door of the ward by police officers, who officially announced that the woman was being taken to the station for questioning, and her son had already been taken into custody and was testifying. Terry had to tell her father everything, relay the whole overheard conversation, and try to calm him down. But to her surprise, Justin Nicholson was quite calm. He said he must have expected something like this. "There's a lesson for me, an old fool. You shouldn't marry without love, just for status." The man was quiet for a while, and then he added, "You should move here to the city immediately, along with the children." And Henry, too, of course, let him move. "You have such a wonderful duo. Of course, there's still a lot to learn, but it's manageable." The next month was full of turmoil for Terry, as she had to organize a move of such a large family hundreds of miles away. Though she had plenty of help, she couldn't even remember how she survived it all. Finally, as she boarded the plane with the children, Terry thought that a boomerang law she had once heard about had worked in her life. If she hadn't taken pity on Henry that cold autumn evening and invited him over, she never would have had the courage to record a song and enter it in a contest. And then the woman would not have found her birth father, and her life would not have changed so abruptly. So it is true that fate rewards those who do not think about profit and help their neighbors for nothing, even when they are in distress. Stanley underwent surgery at the best clinic in the capital, rehabilitation, and now Terry understood what it was like to not count the pennies and to be able to solve all the most intractable problems with money. Now she was sure her son would be all right. They were all nestled in the luxurious Nicholson mansion, the children happy to have a loving grandfather, and Grandpa was over the moon to have 5 grandchildren at once. The only thing that sometimes overshadowed his happiness was that his beloved Marguerite had not lived to see this day, and he would not be able to repay her. And Terry talked to pictures of her husband and mother every night and told them everything that had happened to her during the day. She seriously believed that they were up there in heaven, praying for her and her children, helping as much as they could, and now rejoicing. She was grateful to them. Though looking at their beloved faces, the woman always dropped a tear and wished they were not there now. Shortly after the CEO's recovery, a gala concert was held, where the results of the contest were summed up by audience vote. When the hitherto unknown duo came on stage, the audience greeted them with soft applause. Word travels fast in show business, of course, but no one knew anything about Terry yet. Although Susan's secretary had hinted that Terry was the chief's protege, she was not really believed. After all, everybody knew what an inventor she was. The young people sang, Their voices sounded a little timid at first, but after the first line they gained strength and, weaving together harmoniously, soared upward. The simple but touching melody touched the heart, and the sincerity and soulfulness of the performance brought tears even to the most sophisticated audiences. By the third verse, the audience began to sing along, and many wiped away their tears, because it was a simple story of first love, which everyone experiences in his own way. This duo unanimously won the audience award. It was only after that Justin Nicholson went backstage and announced that he had found his only daughter. All the magazines published interviews with Terry, Henry, and the contest organizer himself, but they did not talk too much about their personal lives, not wanting too much publicity. True, our heroine admitted that she sings the songs created by her parents in the years of her distant youth. And Henry told his sad story and how grateful he was to Terry for her kindness and generosity. He said he regarded her as his big sister from now on, and he was sure that without that family he would have died a long time ago. Terry and Henry took voice lessons from the best teachers and soon began to participate in various competitions. And their songs from the cherished notebook were known all over the country. Now, when the duet Unexpectedly Met was announced, the audience was buzzing with excitement, and everyone was singing along to the words of the song that became a hit. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. I'll find you wherever you are. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.